Wakefield, it's the Nolan Night Show, starring Nolan, where you enjoy Nolan's guest this week, Kyle, standing to the program. And now, ladies and gentlemen, here's Nolan. And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the podcast, season 6, episode 3. And, doing this, I'm very fortunate to be doing this as a student, and there is a well-done, well-run oil machine at URI. I go to school in their sports media department and the Harrington School, and a lot of credit to them and those who help out with that. And I've been very fortunate to speak with the forefront of many of the student members, as well as now people who have graduated from the program and their experiences through the field of sports media. And here's another perfect example of that. You may see him or hear him at the Ryan Center on YurView and ESPN Plus or any other channel that they have. That he is the one and only Mr. Kyle Standing. Kyle, how are you doing today?
I'm great. Thank you so much. An amazing intro. I said earlier, I'm just honored to be here. I know you've interviewed Zach, Paige, Stone, the whole lot. So excited to be a part of that group.
Well, I mean, and I appreciate that. And I appreciate your enthusiasm and excitement when we went back and forth talking about dates and all that fun jazz. And as I said in the intro, to be able to be part of this. And there are other schools, ASU and Northeastern or Northwestern, whatever school it is, that have a really well-known and I'm sure bigger size program for sports media and student journalists. But for URI to have as much fruition and how much they can provide with that and how much they're giving to the students to really grow before they become a professional at it when they get, paid for it, why not attack it at the root and talk to as many people as I can to really get to know how it's like, because I'm not part of that necessarily, as I like to talk about my guests and talk about how things are going. Obviously, this has been a wild 2 years. It's been a wild last 48 hours in the world, everything that's going on for the last few weeks, everything that's went on this past weekend, entertainment wise. And, URI, I don't know if you just saw that the Mitchell siblings had put their name through the transfer portal again. But I don't know how much truth there is to it, but it's interesting. But I'd like to ask your viewpoint on how stuff's going for you, because I know that, you're I and we're due through the pandemic together. So how's it been for you at this point compared to when it first started?
Man, my junior year, it's been just like a breakout year for me. As you mentioned, the past 2 years have just been swarmed with COVID. Couldn't really get into the arenas or, on the field to, get that sideline experience. And, as I've been doing the announcing and stuff for the basketball team this year. And so, it's just been amazing to be back and, to be really in the field doing what, I've been practicing for so long at this school and, finally get to put it in action.
Sure. That's always... So it's a great thing, and I always admire, and I'm sure I mentioned to Paige as well, but to be in your situation where you're covering these teams at a very high level and to be doing it as long as you've been at the school and in the short amount of time you're doing it is definitely a commendable thing. And it's another example of really giving credit to those who allow these opportunities to happen, because I'm sure that they don't have to if they don't want to. And another question I sort of talk about, and I'd love to hear your take on it, where people who are very good at something, whether it be this or being an athlete or music or art or whatever it is, comedy, they all know from an early age, oh, I've wanted to know since I was 6 years old, and that's the only thing. I remember the former URI assistant coach, TJ Buchanan, had mentioned to me when I had him on, where he talked about an early moment where he remembers it was Christmas Eve, and his cousin woke him up when they were living at their grandmother's house, and they were shoveling the driveway to go play pickup in 21. And he kind of knew that's, he was a different cat, and that's how he knew that he wanted to be in basketball to some degree. And I had Maury Hirschgore on as well, and he talked about how when he was a younger kid, his grandfather was blind for most of Maury's life, and how he would report games do his own broadcast of the games play-by-play to tell his grandfather what was happening. For you, what indication did you have, and at what age did you know that what you're doing right now at school is what you have always wanted to do?
Well, that's a great question, because my parents will tell you that they knew that this was going to happen for me since I was a little kid. I went straight from, they always say that I went straight from the Power Rangers to Sports Center. I had that passion for sports since I was a little kid. I always wanted to be on the court though. Basketball is always my favorite sport. I also played lacrosse in high school briefly, but basketball was always the thing I wanted to do, and I always thought, I'd play in college. I never really knew how that was going to happen, but I was always pursuing it. And then when I kind of started to realize or in high school that that might not be the avenue for me, I figure I asked myself, how else can I get involved in sports, because that's definitely what I want to do. And so I signed up for journalism class in my high school, and luckily my best friend in high school at the time, Ryan, his older brother, or sorry, his dad, Greg Elliott, was the editor at my town paper, the Alternative Press in Summit, New Jersey, and he gave me an opportunity. He let me cover some high school sports in Summit, and I fell in love with it. And as soon as I started doing that, I knew, when I go to college, this is what I want to do. So yeah, I mean, I kind of knew from my sophomore year of high school, I'd say that this was it.
Well, I wanted to ask that. I don't know where you're from. You just mentioned that New Jersey, and when I'm from South Kingston, so a real stone's throw away from URI in Kingston, Rhode Island. There was no, for me, besides the South County Independent or the Narragansett Times, there was no real avenue to go into sports. Now, I didn't know, like yourself, that I wanted to be in sports media involved, that I knew where my athletic skills were at. I knew where my level was at. I knew I wasn't going to achieve higher than that. But and there was a school paper at my school, but it was more of an SNL, what's the one at it was like a National Lampoon type of thing where it was more a comedy than sports. So it was more of learning this in this current moment, how to do this stuff. But for you, and you sort of alluded to it with the Alternative Press, what was your relationship like with the profession of sports media and doing that as a career in high school before you got to college?
Yeah, so Mr. Elliott, Greg Elliott, great guy. He's the editor, still the editor at the Alternative Press. He worked for the Houston Rockets. He worked for the San Jose Sharks as a journalist, and a tremendous writer. And obviously, I don't know how many New Jersey people we have listening, but would always suggest to listen or read his paper, because he's just very entertaining in the way that he writes. But I was very lucky for him to give me that opportunity. He really didn't have a lot of people on staff at the time, so he kind of gave me a lot of freedom. He would take the lacrosse, which was a huge sport in my town, Summit Lacrosse. He won a bunch of state championships and everything. He gave me kind of the secondary sports, whether it be the baseball, or in the winter if that's swimming, or in the fall that would be soccer a lot. I was always covering kind of those secondary sports, but he gave me a camera, so I was able to do some photojournalism as well. And he really gave me a lot of freedom in the way that I wrote. So just kind of learning from him was really, it really helped me get a leg up early in my career, and kind of get the idea of what journalism is like. It is fast paced, and you're always working, and you need to stay on top of it. I'd say in high school I wasn't always like that. I was kind of it gets done when it gets done kind of thing. And so I kind of learned the kind of the real way that the industry unfolds.
Sure. That's like me. I have when it gets done, it gets done. It's like me with laundry. When it gets done, it gets done. It might not happen right away, but eventually it will pass and it will get done. Well, that brings up a good point, and I've had certain musicians on where they've talked about they've gone to school, and that sort of, I would think, gives them a leg up in terms of being prepared and ready for going to that next level. And for you, I'm sure that helped a lot when you're experiencing in the field as a high schooler before you get to college to do this. Now, given that and the experience you had with the Alternative Press, what were your expectations for your freshman year at URI in terms of doing stuff? Because I'm sure with the work that you had just put in there with the press, you had some sort of idea where you could see yourself, but how far advanced did you see yourself at URI in terms of sports media?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I didn't really have a gauge of where I stood in terms of, like, in comparison to my peers. I knew that I had experience, but I figured it's college. Everybody's got experience. Everybody has their own resume with them. So I kind of came into it with, I hope I can get involved somehow. And I just want to be in the world, I don't know, of sports media here. And I don't know how that's going to be, but I'm just going to go for it. And URI being the school that it is, I had URI 101 my first day of school. And the assistant teacher she was a student currently and also working for the 5 Cent Cigar, and she said if you're a journalism major and you're not at the 5 Cent Cigar, then I don't know why you're a journalism major,
Yeah.
kind of. So I was kind of baffled because the other school that I had applied to, Syracuse, I wanted to go to the Newhouse School. They have a tremendous sports broadcasting program over there, but unfortunately it didn't get in. But my mom went there and she had told me all about, how it's going to take a long time if you want to go there. It's going to take a long time to, get involved and be writing, important pieces and whatever. But I was just kind of stunned at, URI just welcomed me right as I came in, and
Sure.
I got those opportunities. It may not have been, basketball games right away,
Yeah.
but it was involvement, and I've earned my stripes, I feel like now, and here we are.
Yeah. Well, and I share that sentiment with you. Although I'm not currently with them anymore, my freshman year, I was originally I didn't even get to URI at first. I was waitlisted. And then I got into URI, was originally poli-sci major, not just thinking to myself, hey, if the guy in 2018 could have got elected in 2016, anyone could win in politics. And
Yeah.
then I realized, you know what? It's not for me. I'm not that big of a nut like that. But so I switched to communications over the summer during the whatever that thing is where you stay there for a few days or over the weekend. And then I thought it was, an offset of communications journalism. And next thing I know, I get an email about a week and a half, 2 weeks before school starts by the one and only John Panalone saying, hey, why are you double majoring? Is that what you should be doing? Are you sure you want to be doing that? And I was like, and that like freaked me out. I had no idea who this guy was. Here he is, the guy in charge of the journalism department at URI is barking up my tree about what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm doing. And I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't know that. I haven't thought this and that. And the other thing, I'm like, oh, what about books? And also he goes, we'll figure that out. Don't worry. And lo and behold, I signed up for the 5 Cent Cigar. I did that. And like you said, I started off slowly doing these smaller stories, women's soccer at the time, and maybe swimming and track and field, that stuff. And then you learned and you moved up. And I was then covered women's tennis, which was the majority of the stuff I did there. I covered one preseason women's basketball game during the dark ages of the program before Timmy Reese got there. And when I
Mm.
was working at the 5 Cent Cigar, I covered the women's team, like I said, the tennis team. And it was right as the whole college blues scandal came out. And when
Yeah.
the URI
Yes.
tennis coach, Gordy Ernst, who's a sort of a family friend who my dad coached his dad or coached against his dad. But it was an insane thing because I remember I was talking to him a few days beforehand, and next thing you know, no contact back after a match, no email to set up an interview, and 5 o'clock news that Sunday, I see his face on there. But what you had mentioned, that was just a brief story. I said I don't want to keep you here all day and all night, but it brings up a point where you automatically, I think, in that, or maybe not automatically, but in this realm, you can jump right in and you build your way up, and now you're at this level where you're covering the men's teams and other sports and so on and so forth. But for you, seeing that, I don't want to say you had free range at the alternative press, but you were given a lot of different stories, I'm sure. But when you're joining the student run newspaper where there's a hierarchy in terms of what you can cover, how do you process that with yourself freshman year? Is that something where you have to have a hard time doing? Is that something where you realize you have to accept and then just have your patience?
It's something, at first it's obviously any journalist, it's an industry of ambition, right? And it's, who wants it the most, and everybody wants it so much, and everybody's, hungry for, everybody wants to write the basketball story. And so I came in and I kind of, understood there's juniors, there's sophomores. I'm not, the first priority. I haven't written a story for this paper, so I got to work my way in. And it's kind of the same way that I did at the alternative press. I did have a lot of freedom in the way that I wrote, but I didn't have a ton of freedom in what I was covering. I was covering whether it be baseball, softball. It wasn't stuff that, I love sports,
Sure,
and
yeah.
that's what it boils down to. Is, I didn't love going to those softball, baseball games in the middle of March and freezing my butt off, and talking to the coach while I'm shivering, 4 hours later, um, just to talk about how they lost. But it's something that you do because you love it,
Yeah.
and that's just how I felt coming in here as well. Is, regardless of what I'm covering, I love this, and I'm just going to keep going with it. And if I just keep going with it, I'm sure I'll get where I want to be.
Well, and what I liked about my freshman year, and it sort of changed to my junior year, because no, it was my freshman year I joined. Sophomore year, I only did half the year because of club tennis, and that conflicted and sort of was, I don't want to say excommunicated, but there was a lack of what was going on. But what I liked my freshman year though is I had emailed at the time the editor in chief, and she was more than nice. More, she didn't have to be, and she met with me and other people who were there to sort of talk about what to expect and what it was like. And it was such a community aspect, and it was so nice because you're all with kids relatively your same age, a year or two older than yourself, and they want you to succeed as much as you want them to succeed. And at a certain point, someone like yourself or Zach or anyone else, they get more confidence the more they put into this, and they sort of have a more fearlessness to catch or do stories that are higher and have more importance than the other ones. When did that happen for you when you were there, whether it be for the paper or when you're broadcasting?
I think it happened for me this year because my freshman and sophomore year, I was working as a contributing reporter. I had run after the first semester of my sophomore year, I had run to be a staff reporter and didn't get it. So, there was still that sophomore year feeling that, I'm still not quite there and I need to, push a little bit more. And I think in terms of the social aspect of it, I hadn't reached out enough to members of the paper. I had been friendly with people in the sports section, but I didn't really know everybody at the paper. And I kind of, figured I need to start getting a little out of my comfort zone if I want to, progress. And so my junior year, that it was that feeling of, now Aniakan Okan, he's the editor for the sports section, and it was that feeling of, Aniakan and I were in meetings as freshmen together, and I remember him looking at me after a basketball game and going, we were the young bucks, and now look at us, like we're courtside, doing the whole thing. So I think when I got to my junior year, I'd earned the staff reporter role, and I saw, a peer of mine, Aniakan, who, and especially with Zach as well, being a sophomore, I'm looking at myself like I'm a junior, like, and
Yeah,
Zach is a sophomore. He's, incredible in his own right. And so it just felt like I had kind of
sure.
reached that point, where like I'm amongst, not the higher ups, but just,
Oh yeah.
you know what I mean? Like I've
Yeah.
gained some respect.
Sure. Well, and that's you hope to happen because you don't want to be sitting down at the bottom part of the operation where you're just there just to sit there and take up space. I'm also curious, as I mentioned, URView and ESPN Plus, you do the broadcast for the men's games, and I'm sure other stuff as well. What was that train of thought that you said to yourself, okay, the paper's fun, I'm doing that, but I want to branch off and do other things as well. When did that happen when you wanted to step foot into the broadcast side?
Yeah. So broadcasting, honestly, I never really thought that it would be something that I would enjoy because I've always been very introverted, very quiet, and once you get to know me, I can kind of open up more and just like anyone else. But
Sure.
broadcasting was something where I looked at it and went like, that's kind of scary. I'm going to be on TV for two
Yeah.
hours. But I saw the opportunity on Instagram, actually, through the Harrington School Instagram page, and saw, internship available through the Harrington School, announcers and cameramen, needed, whatever. And so I kind of started out as a cameraman, And I realized quickly that I don't know what I'm doing with the camera.
Yeah.
I just don't speak that language, and I gave it my best, and I contributed every way I could. But I just looked at John Watson, who at the time was running the internship. Unfortunately, is now not with us, but Dave Walzer is now the new guy, and he's done a tremendous job. But John, I told him, I was like, I think I want to try the announcing side of things once the basketball season starts. So I did get some experience doing some volleyball and soccer beforehand, which I think was really valuable because it kind of showed me, okay, this isn't as intimidating as I thought. I do have the passion for this, and like I felt like that was driving me through the broadcasts, and then once I got to the basketball games, I was like, this is incredible. I'm courtside,
Yeah.
With Stone Freeman, guy who I do look up to a lot as a mentor, and it just felt like this is legit.
Yeah.
And but at the same time, in those moments, I've always kind of gotten really nervous and tightened up, and in this moment, I felt like, no, like this is
Yeah.
where I'm supposed to be.
So I'm guessing then, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't want to make any assumptions here, but Paige had talked about this, and I'm sure the others have as well. But it seems like for you, though, you tried the other stuff. That was great, but this is where you knew that you could succeed, and it was sort of, I don't want to say easy for you, but it wasn't a super struggle because you knew what needed to be done. You had those skills.
Yeah, no, I always knew I had I always knew I could talk about sports, and whenever I talked about sports with people, they were always very much like, oh wow, like this kid, he can, this is the sports guy. And so I always knew that I had that in me, and that's how I kind of put it out in my writing, but writing wasn't completely fulfilling for me. And I love writing, and I'd love to pursue a career in journalism as well, but I just I honestly, I don't think I'm as good a broadcaster as I am a writer, but broadcasting is just where I want to be. It's
Sure.
just it's that feeling. It's hard to
Yeah.
describe when you know that this is what I want to do.
Now, although I've interviewed members of the athletic department, whether it be Thor or coaches or some athletes or other members of the media, such as yourself, Stone, and many others, my relationship isn't as sound or as tight with Shane or Michaela. And I know Shane's sort of the leader in terms of the student-run media and giving people opportunities. What have you learned from both of them, but more specifically Shane, in terms of how to operate in this field?
Yeah, I mean, just to start off, I can't speak highly enough of the two of them. Shane and Michaela are incredible at their jobs. To a certain degree, I guess they do have to give us the time of day because we are student reporters and they work for the university. But the professionalism and the kindness that they treat student reporters with is incredible. I did work a lot with the women's team a lot this year. Michaela was always, first one willing to give me opportunities to go to practices or interview someone after a press conference. So as well with Shane, I mean, it's really the same thing. Obviously, it's a lot harder to access, I think, men's basketball players specifically than it is to access women's basketball players. But he was always, pushing and pushing to get me those contacts. I can give an example of, when I did a story on Sebastian Thomas, a profile, it took about 2-3 weeks to get in contact with him, but Shane stayed in contact with me throughout the whole thing. And he's almost like a friend as much as he is a mentor and a colleague. So I really can't speak highly enough of those two. And I've learned so much about how to conduct myself
Sure.
in the sports media room, and how to communicate with people.
Well, it's interesting, and I wish that I had stuck with the paper, although I'm sure being with the broadcast side, it's been easier to have these other contexts to connect with in terms of providing stories and sort of that stuff. And the remainder of this conversation, I want to spend some time with whatever it may be left of talking about this past season, the women's and men's team, but mostly the men's team, seeing as there's been a lot of stuff with them, whether it be locally or at a national level. I'm curious, being that you're on the front line sort of covering these teams and experiencing the season fronthand, although I went to nearly every game as well. Predict what were your predictions of both the men's team and the women's team before the season?
That's a great question. So I had gone to Atlantic 10 Media Day at the beginning of the season to write a preview for the teams, both men's and women's. And, I went through the preseason rankings and the preseason, all conference teams and all that good stuff. And I was feeling really good about both teams. I would say I don't think I would have picked Rhode Island to win the men. I don't think I would have predicted them to win the conference championship. I definitely would have said they would have finished top five. I felt really good about kind of, the continuity of the team. I felt like a lot of guys came back. They had a lot of different weapons and a lot of different guys who could score, do a lot of different things. So I felt like, we have one of the deepest teams in the conference, and the Mitchell twins, I felt really confident about going into the season. So, but to go, along with the women's team, I also thought, they were predicted seventh in the conference, preseason rankings. I felt like it was their conference to win.
Yeah.
They had won, the regular season title last year, and unfortunately fell short in the tournament, but returned all of their players and had added people like Des Elmore, Chanel Williams, the list goes on, Emmy Renat, a ton of these transfers and impact players. And, I felt like they were predicted seventh or second and right behind Dayton. I felt like they could take it.
You mentioned it, and maybe that was about the year prior where they fell short, but they also fell short this year. Seeing the success they've had, and it's been a very great and humbling ride to see how fast Tim Reese has taken this team up to the mountaintop. And I'm glad to see that she's committed to stay here longer after everything that happened with Virginia and possibly being the new head coach for her. But given, how fast the rise they've had, and then the historic season they had again this year, and they had that long streak, predicted to win the conference regular season title, then the conference tournament possibly, and then possibly even get in the March Madness. They were on the outside looking in a little close. For them to have, I don't want to say fall apart really at the end, but where they lost a few games and they fell short in the conference tournament, do you think that the stress that they built up from that streak and the success they had there sort of resulted in, I don't want to say letdown of end of a season, but a disappointment in terms of where they could have been, where they were predicted?
Yeah, and I think to your point, I think the team would say that they didn't achieve what they wanted to. You asked any of the players, they lost that game to Dayton, obviously at home, and I broadcasted that game actually with Zach, and it almost felt like that was the Atlantic 10 championship.
Yeah.
Because this was, URI's moment to prove to everybody in attendance. It was the most highly attended game in URI women's history. This was their moment to prove, like, we're the best team in this conference. You guys should come out and see us every night. Do I still believe that? Absolutely. I think fans should absolutely go and see them more than they do. But they unfortunately came up short. They didn't have Des Elmore that night. And it just felt like, not the wheels were coming off, but it just felt like they had kind of lost a little bit of confidence, maybe. They felt, maybe we're not the best team in the conference all of a sudden. And if you ask them after that senior night game that I also broadcasted, they still would say, we're trying to come out of this champions one way or another. Again, when they lost to Dayton that second time, I think, and they lost to that regular season title, I think that was when it was really deflating, and the wheels kind of started to come off. Obviously, the conference tournament, everybody's going to come, firing and playing as hard as they can. And St. Joe's, give credit to them. They played a great game, and URI was just a little off, and it happens. But yeah, it's a shame the way it ended. But you have to give credit to the incredible season that they had.
I'm curious, on another note, although that was very positive, there were other, negatives for the URI basketball in general with the men's team. Now, we all know about the transfers and the success or the lack of success throughout the latter half of the season and the coaching change and transfers and stuff like that. But with what happened and their new head coach and those players who left, and now some of them are coming back, where does this team go towards, for the season, next season, the seasons to come afterwards?
Yeah, I think the best advice I would give to fans, I guess, would be to be patient. I don't think, I think Archie Miller is a great hire. I'm going to miss David Cox. I want to say David Cox is one of the best people I've ever been around in terms of head coaches of a big time program like URI. Really doesn't have to give people like me or Zach or Neocon or Paige the time of day, but he does, and he's very personable and just a great guy to be around, and a guy that you definitely want teaching your kids about life if you're a parent of a student athlete. But in the same token, made maybe some questionable decisions in games about lineups or
Sure.
whatever it may be. And the success didn't come, and unfortunately it's very cutthroat in college
Yeah.
basketball, and they demand success very quickly. And he had a lot of success as an assistant coach. I think obviously I'm sure he's going to be the assistant at Maryland now, and I'm sure he's
Yeah.
going to do a fantastic job. But sometimes it just doesn't work out, and
Exactly.
I think that's what happened with DC. He was a great guy. Really going to miss him. But with Archie now, I'm really looking forward to it because he's very determined to win, and very determined to make this program into what I think it should be, which is one of the best teams in the Atlantic 10 every year, competing for in the NCAA tournament, and trying to get some wins even in March as well. But it's going to take a while,
Yeah.
because as Malik Martin is returning,
Yes.
but we're losing Ishmael Leggett, Larry Iofalai. We're losing Tress Berry. All of these guys have left open the option to
Sure,
return,
sure.
but just there's going to be I have a feeling there's going to be some new faces next year, and you can't expect right away to have that camaraderie. And obviously Archie's in his first season as well, so it's going to be hard to kind of buy into the system right off the bat like that. Do I think they're going to improve next year? Absolutely, I do. I would hope that you still have guys like Jalen Carey, you still have guys like Malik Martin, Sebastian Thomas. I think is going to be tremendous. He's going to have a great career for URI. It kills. It pains me to hear about the Mitchell twins as well. I think they have some room to grow in terms of their skills, but they have a ton of potential, and I
Yeah.
think give them another year, and they can practice their game a little bit and give them that continuity with some of the guys on the team. They could, the both of them could have a huge year next year, and really have the ability to dominate the Atlantic 10, I think. I think, if Archie brings in the right guys, and certain pieces, fit in certain ways, and, he figures out the lineup kind of situation, I think they can be in the top five, at least top seven in the
Yeah.
Atlantic 10.
Well, and I mean, you bring a good point, patience. And Archie had mentioned that at his press conference while watching that. And, you see Bill Koch and other people around here that are in the sports, the media world, they talked about what he said. There's going to be some dark times, believe me. As a fan, we've seen some of that the last few years with success and what we think success should be and look like. And I'm really happy to see Malik Martin come back because he was a very good player, probably the most consistent across the board that really didn't have an off game or an unbelievable game. It was consistent across. And I'm really happy to see someone like Sebastian Thomas, who shares, like myself, being from Rhode Island. He's a homegrown player, similar to the legendary Tom Garrick, who played in the late 80s during that Sweet 16 run. And this was a test for him, I think, this past year, to see how he would handle this, coming from high school and AAU doing very well, and then coming to here where he wasn't going to be playing. Now he's playing. Now he's starting some games, and to see all these players leave, does he think, well, should I leave now? And now he's coming here. Will he start? I don't know. They have all this space for new players to come right in and play. So he'll compete, but now he knows what the system's like, what he needs to work on. So I'm happy to see him there, and it'll be interesting to see how it goes. And I think the fans, and that's been a struggle the last few years. There's a lot of fair weather fans at URI with teams, whether it's the men's and women's. They struggled. Granted, it's been great. Freshman year, I remember they had maybe a basketball lineup sized crowd at the games with the previous staff, but now they're growing, and it's great. I went to the playoff game at home, and then I went to the senior night game, and to see crowds there excited and fun, it's entertaining, and I'll be glad to see that program continue to grow. How do you, for you to have this past year to cover both teams? The women's team had a lot of success and it was great, but for the men's, they've struggled after non-conference play. How, as someone who's doing this as a sort of precursor to their actual career, how do you learn but also manage to keep a high level of excitement and enthusiasm for a team, even if they're not doing that hot?
Yeah, I think that's part of being a journalist, right? Is finding stories where most people wouldn't see them, and despite the struggles of the men's team this year, you have to find ways to make it exciting for yourself. And if you can make it exciting for yourself, you can make it exciting for others. So, stories like Sebastian Thomas and being like, maybe our team isn't succeeding to the degree that I hoped, but Sebastian Thomas is something to look forward to. Sure. For the future for Rhode Island fans. And, stories like Archie Miller. Obviously that's a huge story anyways, but just finding, avenues where, this doesn't have to be the reality of the situation. Like, doesn't have to all be doom and gloom. Sure. It sucks. And I'll be the first one to admit, it was really disappointing. I really was hoping for a great season, and I really almost expected it, but it still is my team, and you got to support through thick and thin, and you got to be there through the bad times to enjoy the good, Well,
and it's tough. It's tough to see a team up by 9 or more points at half, and then you see them fall apart in the second half. And I'm sure even for your situation and Stones and Pages and Zach's and everyone else, to have to still cover this when others can, quickly get out of the building and go home and not experience that. And it's gonna be tough. It's not gonna be. I don't think it's gonna be smooth sailing, even with a new head coach to the caliber that Archie Miller is. But it's gonna be a while till they get back to what it is. But I think give them time. They're gonna see how energetic I think Archie Miller is, how passionate he is, and give him time, and he'll be accustomed to the Rhode Island habits and ready to bring this program back up to what it used to be. Because it was great watching them win, and obviously, like anything else, it's not as fun to see them not succeed as well. But I want to ask this, the last question before our segment, and then I'll let you go. I know you're from New Jersey, me being from Rhode Island, so I have some idea of what the history is like. I don't know what your image or your perspective of it is like, but in other schools, Duke, North Carolina, Syracuse, all these other schools, you look up and you see all the banners, not necessarily Sweet 16s, Elite Eights, and all that fun jazz, but more of retirements. You see it in the NBA with jerseys being put up there, names being recognized and remembered for ever and ever. And that's been a situation that's occurred at URI where people are talking about it now. You see Rody Vault, the Twitter account where the guy's been doing interviews with former players and talking about their experiences and that sort of stuff and bringing that to cause. If you could, who would you, if you have an idea of anything that happened before you got to URI here. How much of an impact do you think that would create for the school, and how do you think they should go about doing that?
Um, that's a really great question because obviously being a sports journalist in high school, that played a huge part in where I wanted to go to school, and Syracuse was always in that conversation because of the success that they have year in and year out in athletics, not just basketball but sports like lacrosse as well and soccer, and they may not be a great football team, but they're in the ACC and they're always going to be in the conversation. But URI was never really on my radar until until they started making the tournament.
Sure.
My sophomore and junior year, and I kind of looked at it and went, well, that's kind of cool, and hey, and they're pretty close by, and
Yeah.
it's a good school, and they have a good, oh wow, they have sports media, so I can do that too, and
Yeah.
it also kind of started to add up for me. And once I got here, it was kind of like, this is perfect for me. But, um, you know, for the school to do that for people like me who are in high school now, um, they just, like they're doing, they need to continue to, um, support Archie and the program in the ways that they can. I mean, I'm not saying, you know, give everything to the basketball program, but
Yeah.
definitely, to have trust in what he's going to do. You hired him for a reason.
Yeah.
Thor has very high aspirations for this program, and I think Archie can attain that, but you have to give him kind of the resources to do so. And URI, like Archie said, is a very desirable school
Yeah.
for a lot of basketball players. It's in New England, kind of a hotbed for basketball and sports in general, and it's a great school in its own right. And I think they just need to keep working to make that more desirable than it
Yeah.
already is. By adding coaches, high profile coaches, high profile players, on top of the beautiful campus and the opportunities that it gives and all that. So I think they're doing a great job giving him a nice budget to work for assistant coaches, and though I'm sure they'll work with him on scheduling as well, which is also huge. Making sure you get some good games on the schedule to give the team some publicity. Um, and once that publicity comes, then the students start coming.
Well, and I think that that speaks to in terms of helping Archie really build a program. I read that he was bringing back or retaining, however you want to say it. Am I forgetting his name? Austin Carroll on the bench, and I mean, I was surprised to a degree to see Ryan McCluskey, the special assistant and the video coordinator for the team at the press conference, as they were part of David Cox's staff. But I hope that it brings some legitimacy. Yeah, that's how you say the word, to the program again, and it'll be interesting. And I think it's going to be hard bringing some talent in terms of the coaching staff, because Rhode Island doesn't have that humongous budget that the other schools or other states have. Where, because I remember when I was my freshman year, or was it sophomore year, whenever Dan Hurley left, and he was the highest paid person in the state of Rhode Island. Now,
Mm-hmm.
that shouldn't necessarily be the case, but that's just what happens being the small state that is. But I have hopes for them. I have high hopes. I'm going to have patience for them, but the greater days we will see. Happy days will be here again. I want to end this with the segment I usually do called the one word challenge. And for those out there who don't know what the one word challenge is that each week, my guest, this week being the one and only Kyle Standing, is I will take things, places, people, and other sort of things of that nature and words. There's something to do with my guest, and he has to do his best to say a word or two that comes to mind when he hears that noun. Are you ready for this?
Let's do it, Nolan.
The Ryan Center.
Electric.
Stone Freeman.
Roadie legend.
Zach Austin.
Up and coming roadie legend.
Kingston RI.
Home.
And last but certainly not least, Kyle Standing.
that's a tough one. Sports reporter. That's what I would say.
Well, never mind Zach Austin being up and coming roadie legend. You have to make room for yourself because, as I said before we got going, seeing these other people do it and then having Paige on, these people having been on the show and they're talking about yourself and just seeing the growth that can happen within this program if you put your mind to it, like anything else in life, is amazing. So I'm appreciative that you took the time and you were so eager and excited and willing to do this whenever and wherever. I'll let you do now is, I usually let my guests do: plug, promote, put forth anything that they had that they'd like to share with the world.
Thank you. I just want to say, first of all, thank you so much, Nolan, for the opportunity. It's an honor to be on this podcast, like the roadie legends before me, and you do a great job. I just wanted to say, and of course, I was so willing to be a part of it. With that being said, I would just say, check out my archive on the 5 Cent Cigar, Kyle Standing, standing just like standing up, and check out YurView, Cox YurView and ESPN Plus. I'm still working on the softball and baseball in the spring, so you can find me over there.
Well, if you'd like more news and updates regarding the podcast, do us a favor: subscribe, like, comment, share, follow, all that grand stuff. Because years from now, and I used to say Joe Rogan, but that's not the case. Years from now, when you look back on this, and Zach is now covering for the for NBA, he's taking over for Mike Breen and all these people at TNT. You want to look back and say, "Holy crap, this was a pretty amazing podcast episode." So do that for me, please. And Kyle wants that too, so thank you. And you want more news and updates, follow on Twitter, Nolan Carr Night, and on Instagram, Nolan Carr @night. And in the words of Johnny Carson, I bid you all a heartfelt good night until we see each other again. Take care.